Hi everyone, I'm Nicholas Tutora. Welcome to Tutora Time. Well, today in Congress, they're having hearings of Rachel Levine, who Joe Biden nominated to be Assistant Secretary at Health and Human Services Department. Levine is transgender, was born a male, now living as a female, and she was questioned today by Rand Paul on gender reassignment surgery and hormone therapy for children.
American culture is now normalizing the idea that minors can be given hormones to prevent their biological development of their secondary sexual characteristics. Dr. Levine, you have supported both allowing minors to be given hormone blockers to prevent them from going through puberty, as well as surgical destruction of a minor's genitalia.
Okay, this is really out of control, what's going on now in this country.
Do you support the government intervening to override the parent's consent to give a child puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and/or amputation surgery of breasts and genitalia?
Senator, transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field, and if confirmed to the position of Assistant Secretary of Health, I would certainly be pleased to come to your office and talk with you and your staff about the standards of care and the complexity of this field.
Let it go into the record that the witness refused to answer the question. For most of the history of medicine, we wouldn't let you have a cut sewn up in the ER, but you're willing to let a minor take things that prevent their puberty, and you think they get that back?
This move to sexualize children is outrageous because they can't have children. They need to use your children to forward their agenda. You know, when you're a kid, if you say you want to be an airplane pilot, I hope your parents don't put you behind the cockpit of a plane. If you say you want to be an astronaut, I hope they don't launch you out into space. Rand Paul pointed out that some of this gender-type therapy, starting as young as children from 3 years old.
In the gender dysphoria clinic in England, 10% of the kids are between the ages of 3 and 10. We should be outraged that someone's talking to a 3-year-old about changing their sex.
3 to 14 years old, somebody who is clearly a child, clearly doesn't even know what the world is about yet, they're allowing to make decisions on gender reassignment. This is a form of child abuse. There's no doubt about it. All this craziness, all this demolition of the United States of America really started on 9/11. And truthfully, they're winning the war. They brought down those buildings and it instituted a police state, basically. The beginnings of it took place with the Patriot Act. And now the Patriot Act is being turned on the American people, and all those tactics of seeking out terrorists, they're now going to turn towards the American people. When 9/11 first happened, one of the things the American public started to become more aware of was genital mutilation that goes on in the Islamic world, female genital mutilation, to prevent them from experiencing pleasure during sex and to make sure they're loyal to the man. It's just as brutal there, and it's becoming as brutal here with this gender reassignment therapy and surgery for children. They want to make it, the Democrats want to make it, that a child, a minor child, can receive this type of therapy or possibly even the surgery without any consultation from the parents. And the bill that they're pushing through Congress would make it a crime for a parent to try to stand in their way and take your children from you if you don't agree to go along with this.
You know who I don't need in helping me with my parental decisions? I do not need the help of the United States federal government. Congress is replacing mom and dad with bureaucrats. Under H.R. 5, parents who choose not to subject their child to puberty-blocking drugs, cross-sex hormones, they could have their children removed from their custody.
This is clearly madness. Children have no understanding of sexuality. There's no way a child at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever age you want to say, anybody under the age of adulthood can't really know what it means to make this kind of choice. Saying that you want to change your gender and your genitalia, you are making a sexual decision. And this is part of their step. The next thing that's going to come along down the road, not too far, is pedophilia. If a child can make a judgment as to whether they want to change their gender, why can't they make a judgment about sexuality? It's perverse. A child has no ability, no mental ability to do that. I mean, it used to be a child wants to have their dessert before dinner, or a child wants to stay out too late, or ride their bike after sundown, and a parent has to step in and say no. Now we went from, Billy, you got to do your homework before you could have dessert tonight, to, Billy, you can decide whatever gender you want to be, and I can't stop you, and the state is in control. If that's not living in a police state, I don't know what is. I mean, they're taking control of our children right before our eyes. They want to make it illegal for an adult to stand in the way of a child making this kind of cataclysmic decision. And so many people grow up to regret it. There's so much damage. We don't know what the effects of these drugs that they're using off-label on children are.
Infertility is another problem. None of these drugs have been approved for this. They're all being used off-label. I find it ironic that the left that went nuts over hydroxychloroquine being used possibly for COVID are not alarmed that these hormones are being used off-label. There's no long-term studies. We don't know what happens to them.
I'm a pharmacist of over 25 years, and the experimentation that's happening now on children with these medications is horrendous. The other thing that's really hysterical on the left, they're very anti-big pharma. You hear Bernie Sanders and a lot of the Democrats out there all the time putting down big pharma, saying how corrupt they are, but yet they're relying on pharmaceuticals and surgery for this quote-unquote gender dysphoria or gender reassignment. If someone requires hormone therapy and surgery to achieve the gender they want, then obviously it's not a naturally occurring thing in nature. You can't say it's a natural gender if you require pharmaceutical companies and surgery to produce the gender that you want. Women, young women cutting off their breasts, mutilating their genitalia, men and women.
According to the WHO, genital mutilation is recognized internationally as a violation of human rights. Genital mutilation is considered particularly egregious because, as the WHO notes, it is nearly always carried out on minors and is a violation of the rights of children.
It should actually be a crime for a parent to allow their child to change their gender. If a young person feels disoriented around their gender, that's fine. They should be respected, but in no way should surgery or hormone therapy be put into play. Once you're an adult, if you want to engage in these things, well, you have the right to do it. Nobody can really stop you from doing it. But for a child to be put in that situation, how does a child know the difference, what it feels like to be a man or a woman? How do they even know such a thing? You could tell a child they're an alien, they're a monster from outer space, and they'll believe it. Kids, you used to be allowed to dress up as cowboys and Indians. So if you dressed up as an Indian, that didn't mean you want to be an Indian for the rest of your life, or now you are an Indian. This person, Rachel Levine, it's really demented that somebody like this would be in charge of our children's health care in this country. They want to close down schools. They want to eliminate normal education for children, and they're replacing it with this gender-bending, borderline pedophilia agenda. According to this logic that the left is now following, that if a parent doesn't agree to this, then their children could be taken away from them. So how does that apply to traditional religious teachings? Christianity, Judaism, Islam, they teach, they actually teach homosexuality is wrong. And there's specific things in the Torah and in the Old Testament about men dressing as women or appearing as women and this type of thing. So are you saying that if somebody now rejects on religious grounds, they're going to be defined as hateful, and that's going to be hate speech, and now your children can be removed from you? If you're a child in a Catholic school and you're being taught the differences between men and women, and that certain things are immoral, are you going to be prosecuted by the federal government for teaching hate speech and systemic oppression, whatever they're going to call it? This is twisted. This is psychotic, actually. There's only one hope on this that I have, because truthfully, since the election, that Time magazine, the 2020 election, that Time magazine admits was fortified, not rigged, mind you. They point out it wasn't rigged, it was fortified to prevent Donald Trump from winning. Well, once the election system has been altered, it doesn't matter if you're against these things or not, because your vote, your voice won't count. When they talk about was the election fair, there's a lot of things to look at, but one of the things to look at is things like this. Do you really believe that 80 million people voted and are on board with their children being able to consent by themselves without any parental authority to gender surgery or hormone therapy to alter their gender? Do you really think the masses of the country, the majority of the country, believe in such a thing? I'll tell you, if they do, we have a really, really sad situation. If the government can take away your children, then they could take away your children if you're religious and you oppose this type of madness, or if you don't want your children to hear this kind of madness. What is this rush also to sexualize children? Let children be. Eventually, everybody grows up and sexuality is a part of life. During your childhood, you have a few brief years in your life. Let them enjoy their childhood free from this sexual pressure. You know, one of my only also saving hopes possibly in all of this is that young people usually rebel against the generation before them. So hopefully while they're busy pushing all this gender bending pseudo-psychology on people, the young people will rebel. Hopefully what will be produced down the road, it doesn't help us right at this moment, but hopefully what will be produced in the next generation will be a very staunch, masculine and feminine people who like their gender identity. Also, in a hopeful way, you might say that all this gender-bending philosophy is kind of a weeding out. It's natural selection, because people who think like that, they can't reproduce without the help of heterosexual and normal birthing processes, or they can't do it without, hormones and therapy. So they really can't sustain themselves. It's kind of like the religious group, the Shakers from 150 years ago. They believed in celibacy, and after one generation, they stopped existing, because if you're not reproducing, you're not going to continue. So perhaps this is a backward way of natural selection, weeding out those who aren't strong enough to reproduce and carry the race forward. You're not going to beat biology. And if you're creating a human race where the population is dependent on the pharmaceutical companies for their sexuality, we got a really big problem on our hands. We have to return to the eternal truths that we learn, that we know, and we cannot be shamed that we're going to be called bigots or racists or, transphobes if we don't allow our children to be the experimentation for these madmen. People like Jeffrey Epstein, they exist in the world, and they prey on children and the confusion of children and the uncertainty of children. If you legitimize this type of thing, you are just opening the floodgates for all kinds of perversion of our children. It's child abuse. Children are supposed to be protected. You cannot abuse a child emotionally by telling them that they're a different gender. Child doesn't even know what that means. No matter what they say, they don't know what it means. All right? Children are children. They don't have the ability to make these cognitive and these kinds of decisions for themselves. That's the role of parents, and the state now wants to take that role away, and they want to be the parent. We're on a very slippery slope, America. We're on a very dangerous path. We have to keep speaking out. I never realized how subversive and dangerous free speech can be until I started speaking out fully. Our free speech is a danger to those who want to control us. So we have to make sure we keep speaking out and we keep getting the truth out in every way we possibly can. Well, I'm Nicholas Tutora, and I'll talk to you again soon on Tutora Time. Hi, everyone. It's Nicholas Tutora. Now more than ever, it's so important to keep free speech alive. So make sure you click the subscribe button so you can stay part of our conversation.